Without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker, Abenezer Abebe. He's a Renaissance man whose fields of training and experience include business, technology, and the arts. Utilizing his classical music training and electronic business education, he launched an independent music production company and has traveled across North America as a composer, producer, and artist. He's currently conducting research on alternative revenue models in the entertainment and advertising industries through the use of disruptive technology. Abenezer works at Apple while producing records and completing his Bachelor of Commerce degree. So join me in welcoming Abenezer.
On November 10, 2014, a song came out that drastically changed the way that I interact with people. Now I find myself saying things like, "Don't believe me, just watch," whenever I'm trying to prove a point to a friend, or I'll come out the shower, I'll look in the mirror and think to myself, "Wow, I'm so pretty, I gotta kiss myself." And if you don't know what I'm talking about, these are all lyrical references to the song Uptown Funk by Mark Ronson featuring Bruno Mars. Now the question that we all have, I believe, and the question that I've had for a while is, why is this song so catchy? And to try to explain why the song is so catchy, I looked into the diffusion of innovation timetable. Now this particular chart is something that we use in the technology business to try to explain why certain ideas and concepts spread throughout culture. Now I've made a few different changes to this to make it a little bit more relatable to music. So the people that we call innovators, I've decided to rename them to blogs and DJs. This is because blogs and DJs are usually the first people that break a record. They write reviews and they tell us what to like, what not to like, and their opinions. Right after that, we have the early adopters. The early adopters, I decided to call them the hipsters. And I call them hipsters because they're the ones that follow trends that are really not in the mainstream. They're the friends that we have that come up to us and they say, "Hey, check out the song." And sometimes we like it and sometimes we don't. And maybe a year later, we hear it on the radio. Right after that, there's this phenomenal thing known as the chasm. Right after the chasm is a group of people known as the early majority and the late majority. And collectively, I call these people the mainstream. Now, the mainstream are people that find their music because it's trending on the radio, or it's doing really well on the charts on iTunes or on Spotify. And so these people find their music because it's readily available. So now the concept here is for a song to be successful and catchy, it has to find its way through the first two group of people and successfully cross through the chasm. And so today what we're going to explore is how Uptown Funk was able to do that. And the first and the most important thing is Uptown Funk is catchy because it's actually very familiar. And you might be looking at me thinking, "What do you mean? I never heard the song before November 10th, or maybe even after that." But the concept here is Uptown Funk is using many things that we are all familiar with to draw into things that we have in our minds from our past. And so my first example is Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. So if you can just join me here. I'm going to play a part from Michael Jackson's Billie Jean, and I'm going to get you all to clap along to it, okay? Here we go. Right? Don't stop. Keep going. You see that? Now that right there is a demonstration of tempo and meter. Tempo is how fast the song is moving. And both Uptown Funk and Billie Jean are much slower than most dance songs that we hear on the radio. Most dance songs sit above the 120 beat per minute mark. Uptown Funk and Billie Jean, as I just demonstrated, are both sitting at about 115 beats per minute, being slower, being much cooler. And we tend to move to them in a more natural manner. It doesn't really force us to move too fast. And the cool thing is, the second part is meter. Meter is how we tap our foot, bob our heads, and clap our hands to a song. And as you notice right there, you clap your hands and you bob your heads the same way to Uptown Funk as you do to Billie Jean. This is no coincidence. But the next thing that we're going to talk about is probably the most important thing in music, and it's known as melody. Melody here is something that I'm going to try to describe is there was a man by the name of Pythagoras in the 5th century BC. He came up with a concept, and he said that tones, two notes played together, when they are apart by a ratio of 4 to 3, they cause this thing known as sensory consonance. Sensory consonance is just a fancy way of saying things that are pleasing to our ears or to our sensories, right? And so he said when a tone is 4 to 3 apart, when two tones are apart by that margin, they cause a good feeling inside of us. Now, a ratio of 4 to 3 is known to musicians as perfect fourth. And to people that just enjoy listening to music, a perfect fourth sounds like this. The distance between those two notes. Now, where else do we recognize this from? Here Comes the Bride, right? Where else do we recognize this from? We wish you a Merry Christmas, right? Where else do we recognize this from? If you don't know what I'm talking about, just blow your mind right there. So that right there is melody. And so it is no coincidence that when we hear that boom, we hear it from a block away, we know exactly what song it is, and it gets us excited. So that right there is melody. Now, more than just the concept of melody, meter, and tempo, there's a lot of things that Uptown Funk is referencing from the past that we are familiar with, or maybe our parents are familiar with, but things that have been successful. Right here we have a song known as Oops Upside Your Head by a band known as the Gap Band. Now the Gap Band released the song in the 1970s and it was dubbed a funk anthem. It was so successful and so danceable that they even created a dance after it called the Oops Upside Your Head dance. Oops Upside Your Head sounds like this.
Don't believe.
Sorry, here we go.
Oops upside your head. Say oops upside your head.
Now, where else do we recognize this from?
Uptown Funk you up. Uptown Funk you up.
Oops upside your head. Say oops upside your head.
Uptown Funk you up.
That's the rhythm right there. And the rhythm is so infectious, and it was so infectious in the 70s that it was still infectious in 2014/15. And not only that, but here we have a song known as Apache by the Sugar Hill Gang. Now, if you're not familiar with Apache Sugar Hill Gang, many of us know it from when it was debuted on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It was such a phenomenal record that many of you know the dance, right? And from this song, we get this particular line.
Jump on it, jump on it, jump on it.
Now, where else do we hear this?
Jump on it if you.
Here we go.
Jump on it if you.
Jump on it, jump on it.
Is that not crazy? So here we have Mark Ronson and Bruno Mars and all the producers grabbing rhythms and concepts and lyrics that are familiar to us from the back of our heads. Maybe we didn't recognize it when we first heard it, but when we hear them together, we hear something very familiar, something that we are aware of. And probably the craziest reference of them all has to be to this great man right here, Trinidad James. Trinidad James came out with a record in 2012 known as All Gold Everything. This song was a viral hit all over YouTube. And in this song, we have these following lyrics.
Don't believe me, just watch.
Don't believe me, just watch. Where else do we recognize this from?
Don't believe me, just watch.
Don't Believe Me, Just Watch is mentioned more than 14 times in Uptown Funk. It is repeated so often that it's influencing my vocabulary and probably yours as well. And so it is no coincidence that that is so catchy. And when we put all of these familiar concepts together, we get a record like Uptown Funk. Uptown Funk is so successful that it is currently sitting #1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100. And it's not only sitting in the Billboard Hot 100 right now, but it's been there for the last 12 weeks. And I believe it's going to stay there for a little bit longer. And when we put all these concepts together, we get a song that is so catchy and so infectious that we have grandparents and little children making covers to it all over YouTube. So here, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to put all of these different concepts together and see what we come up with. Here we go.
Uptown Funk. Uptown Funk.
Okay.
Uptown Funk. Uptown Funk. Uptown Funk.
Upside your head, say
Uptown Funk.
upside your head,
Uptown Funk.
upside your head, say
Uptown, 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 uptown Funk. Uptown Funk. Uptown Funk. Uptown
Thank you very much.